Today we're going to change the brake on my 2004 Ford Explorer Sport Trac. We're going to go ahead and replace both the rotors and the pads for the front. What I'm going to do first is go ahead and get the car lifted up, get the tires off, and we'll get it set up to change with the brakes. We went ahead and lifted up the car, got the tires off, put them under the car's on jack stands, as well as being supported by the jack here. We also have the back wheels chalked off, as well as the parking brake on. What we're gonna do first is take off the caliper. To make it a little easier, we're gonna go ahead and turn over the steering wheel so we have more access to the bolts on the back. And then we're gonna get those pads out first, as well as the caliper, and then we're gonna get the rotors off. To get the pads out first, I'm just gonna go ahead and loosen up this screw, this screw. This should open it up, and then we should be able to just take them out of there. We went ahead and got the pads out. Now what we're gonna do is take the caliper off. There's two 15mm bolts on the back, they're pretty tight. We have this breaker bar here to try to get it off. Go. So we got both the bolts out now. I just don't want to let this go because it will fall and you don't want to mess up this brake line. I'm just going to put it right here on the lower control arm. Some tension on it. It's kind of heavy. Next thing we're going to do now that it's free is we're going to take this rotor off. So here's the rotor. To get it off, what we're going to have to do is take off this dust cap here. I've already loosened this. I think I should be able to pretty much take it out now. The setup we have here is a cotter pin with a little cap under, a washer. There's a nut between those two, and then behind it should be the bearing. Once we get this cotter pin out and loosen up that nut, we should be able to take off the rotors. So this is the old rotor, one of the old brake pads. All four of the new ones here, as well as the rotor we're gonna install on this side. I've been meaning to do this job for a while. Got some metal on metal. On the rotor itself too, it's pretty bad. Kind of see that there. On the back of the rotor here, we have this seal and bearing that we had to take out. I took it out off camera, but what I did was get this screwdriver in there, this flathead, gently try to push it in. You don't want to damage this thing. I unfortunately don't have a replacement, but so it looks like it's in pretty good condition. I'm just gonna clean it up a little bit. Once you're able to take that out, you get the rear bearing out. There's one of these in the back, one of these in the front. So we're gonna transfer these onto the new one, and then I'm gonna go ahead and get the rotors back on. Here we got the front bearing on the back, washer, nut, seal. What I'm gonna do real quick is just clean them all with some brake clean, and then we're gonna re-grease them so they can be installed. So now we're gonna grease it. You see on the inside it has those little spinning things. I don't know what they're called. It's a bearing though. What you're gonna wanna do is just add some grease here. Just force it into there so that each side of it has it. You don't wanna over grease it, but we can always take some off. Do that from both sides. Clean it off a little bit, but it's got the gist of it. have the wheel bearing prepped. I'm just gonna spray the inside with some brake clean, wipe it down really quick, and then we're gonna go ahead and get the bearing installed. I'm gonna go ahead and prep the spindle for the rotor just by putting some grease on it. Don't need too much, just a little bit of a thin layer. Still want to get it on the threads. We have the rear bearing and the seal on and the rotor. We'll go ahead and put it onto the spindle. I'm gonna clean it down again, but now we're gonna put the bearing, washer, retaining clip, cotter pin in. I got the both bearings in, washer, nut, cover, cotter pin through. So I'm gonna show you guys how we're gonna wrap this around. It's not going anywhere. Lastly, we're just gonna go ahead and put the dust cap back on. Just wanna get it in place. We'll cover this up so it's not damaged and then just hit it with the hammer lightly. Nothing too hard, just nice gentle taps all the way around. Make sure it sits flush. Looks good. Now that we have the new rotor on, what we're gonna do is get this caliper ready. You can see here these pistons, they're sticking out a little bit. What we're gonna have to do is force them back in. The way your brakes really work is when you push down the pedal, it forces the fluid down this line here. And then this line pushes behind these pistons to compress your brake pads together to squeeze your disc. So something like this. So to be able to do this, what we're gonna do is push them back in. I'm just gonna go over the top of the car, open up the master cylinder. That's where your brake fluid goes. The best way to do it is to use the old pad. Have this clamp that I'm just gonna put in here. Other way. And we're just gonna twist it to compress to push them back in. You just wanna make sure you open up that cap because you don't want to have a little bit more room. What I went ahead and did was remove this bracket. It's just the caliper bracket goes on like this. You see the two screws where it would enter in right there and right there. This gives me more space to be able to get this in. I do it this way. And then with the clamp behind it. All I'm gonna do here is just twist. You wanna stay close to the center as possible, but I am gonna alternate sides so I can compress them down as evenly as I can. You can see this piston starting to go down, so I'm gonna release it. Switch over to this other side. Put it right in and start twisting again. And since it's new rotors and brake pads, I'm gonna need to compress them all the way down. But you kind of see how it works. So the next thing we're gonna go ahead and do is prep the brake pads in the caliper bracket. We're gonna go ahead and grease up the brake pads on all the contact points between the brake pads and the caliper bracket. We're also gonna go ahead and put on the hardware. I wanted to replace this, but they didn't have any in stock. The brake kit that I got didn't come with it. So I'm just gonna reuse this one. They're in okay shape. They fit okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get these on now. Where you want to grease is on the back here of the pads, where it make contact with the piston. For the other contact points, what it's going to be is this edge here. Reason being is because when it's in the bracket, you can see it goes like this. You can kind of see how the shapes match up there. The reason you want to grease it is because when you compress, it's going to slide back and forth inside of that bracket, and that metal on metal contact could make some screeching, squeaking. I'm sure you've heard it on the road before. It's either usually worn out brake pads or if that's not greased properly. So we're going to grease it both on the pads and on the bracket here, and then we're going to get it back onto the vehicle. Okay. So now I got the caliper mounting bracket on. What I'm going to do is thread the bolt. Got some Loctite on it. Line it up. Just push it through. So now we have the mounting bracket as well as the pads in. It's got some Loctite on these nuts, bolts, and since the caliper's compressed, should be able to fit right over. Let's just get it in place. Put this, start this bolt so we line it up. In. Put the other one in on the bottom. Just going to evenly tighten it back and forth, and then I'm going to torque it down. Now that we got these bolts on tightened, you'll see that we got the rotor in, the caliper back on, new brake pads, and this is pretty much done. We should be able to put the tire back on now. We still got to do the other side though. It's the exact same process, so I'm just going to time lapse through it. So we can just get it done really quickly. Last thing we need to go ahead and do is just bleed the brakes. You can see the bleeder screws right there. What we have is just a wrench on it. I'm just gonna push the brakes on the inside to go ahead and push the fluid out of there while Josh opens it. We're just trying to get all the air out to make sure we have a firm pedal on there.
Hit it again.
3, 1, 2.
Hold it. Ooh, do it one more time. Yeah, that was a good one too.
Good?
Yeah, now we're set.